on the safe side. Okay. Hello everyone. Thank you for coming. Welcome. On Memorial Day, May 27, 2024. I just want to thank our troops and their families for serving. And also wanted to thank Zander for organizing this event. He came up with the idea. And finally, I also want to thank all of our authors and participants for coming out and the supporters and readers of Transgress Press. Um, I am Tristan Cotton. I am the managing editor of Transgress Press, and for 12 years now, we have been publishing books that address LGBTQ2S identities and issues, and we publish over 31 books. And tonight we have a really great program where we're going to explore some authors talking about their lives since the publication of Manning Up. So 10 years ago, Xander? Yeah, 10 years ago. So with that, I will turn it over to Xander, who is going to take it on from now.
Thank you, Theo. Hello, everybody. It's good to see you. Yeah, it dawned on me, a couple of months ago that the Manning Up book was turning 10 years old, and I thought, oh, wouldn't it be fun to like catch up, right? Catch up with the authors, and then I thought, well, I mean, I could send them all emails and catch up with them, but it might be fun to have them do something public. And so I invited all 27 authors. There are 27 different stories in the book, and about 13 or 14 said yes. And not all are here right now, but hopefully they'll come in. So I just wanted to say thank you for agreeing to be here. For those of you who are unfamiliar, this is the book Manning Up. Oh, there it goes. Um, but my introduction to Transgress Press precedes Manning Up because I was there at the very beginning with Theo when Transgress Press published their very first book, which we partnered on, which was Hung Jury. So if you haven't seen Hung Jury, that's a wonderful book of stories about bottom surgeries over a historical time frame. Starting with the first phalloplasty surgery, Dr. Michael Dillon in the UK in the 1940s. And then it also includes Lou Sullivan's stories about his metodioplasty. So just a plug for the very first Transgress Press book. Um, for those of you who don't know, anybody who got the call, who responded to the call, you may remember this, that the Hung Jury book, or excuse me, the Manning Up book, was originally called Brotherhood is Powerful. I don't know if you remember that when I put the call out, or when Mitch Kellaway is the co-editor, he's not able to be here with us today, but he did help me edit the book. He did a lot of editing, thankfully. But Brotherhood is Powerful. For those of us who are sort of old school, who came from lesbian community, we remember Sisterhood is Powerful. And for some of us that had an impact in our lives, pro or con, depends on who you are. But either way, it was a pivotal book, within the community, so to speak. And so this idea of, a lot of the stories that come out are typically focused around transition. Even my first book, Letters from My Brothers, it's about transition. A lot of people's stories, it's about transition. Not all, but many of them are. And so the idea for Brotherhood is Powerful, and then what became Manning Up, was, well, what happens after that, right? What happens after we transition and we're just living our lives? What's going on? How are people feeling? How are they, navigating all of the different areas of their life, work and family and the social aspects of their life? So we put out the call, and many people responded, and we accepted 27 of the stories that are in the book. So the story behind how the title changed is because we got a submission called Manning Up from Michael Woodard, who's here with us today. And I got to tell you, it pissed off Mitch and I so much that, and you might want to just recap slightly, Michael, when it's your turn so that people understand what I'm saying. And we were like, let's call the whole book that, Manning Up, just as a, an honor, a tribute to what a crazy thing you went through with a psychotherapist, I might add. As one, I apologize for her. So that's how the name change happened. And so it was based on the experience of reading that chapter when it was first submitted. So what we're going to do is we're going to have the each individual author, and I'll call your name, and I'll just call you in order of when I got your email saying that you'd be able to join us. That was the easiest way for me to keep track. And what I'll do is I'll just ask you to not read your chapter, right? People either have the book or have gotten the book. And so the idea is that to give us an update on your life from the perspective of the story that you wrote, right? What has transpired in the last 10 years, or how are things going for you now in whatever area it was that you were talking about, whether it be family life, work life, a combination, your own, I don't know, philosophical perspective on things, whatever you were writing about. And then we will have a Q&A for the remaining time. So I'm going to ask I'm going to ask Jamison to go first because Jamison Green wrote the foreword for the book. And thank you very much for that, Jamison. And so, yeah, let's just have Jamison go. I think we'll try and like pin the author who's talking so that maybe they go to the top. You can also click on the view button in the top right hand corner of your screen, and you can change it so that like the person who's speaking is a person that gets highlighted for you. But we'll leave it in gallery for all of us here. But I think we can pin Jameson
I
so
just
that
did.
he's, yeah. Okay.
Okay. Well,
All right. Thanks,
thank
Jameson.
you. Yeah, you bet. Um, I when the call for this book came out, I was really frustrated that I did not have the time at that period to actually contribute a meaningful, piece about manning up. Um, that was personal and deep, which is what I would want to do. So I was really honored to be able to write the foreword because it gave me a chance to wax philosophical about the condition of manhood and what we as special kind of men face. And Zander sent me a message yesterday saying, "Would you be willing to talk about, what's changed for you with respect to the forward in the past 10 years?" And I would have to say, frankly, nothing, um, except that the word transsexual has taken a big hit in the world. And, that's an issue for the title of the book as well, for the subtitle, in which the first word is transsexual. But I personally don't think that there's anything wrong with that word. It's a meaningful word. It has a history. It's not an insult to me. Um, it's sort of self-explanatory in a way. Um, but that's the only thing I think that has really shifted from based on what I wrote in the foreword. But my own life, what was going on at the time that you guys were accepting articles for this, I had just finished my doctorate in law, and I was working at the Center of Excellence for Transgender Health at UCSF. I had two special projects that were grant funded with a 6 month break in between funding periods. And and I had just been elected president of the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, and I was in my president-elect phase. So I was really deep in that organization, preparing for the period of time when I would be president and be able to actually make radical changes in that organization, which I'm proud to say I did. Um, so, yeah, but I see this book as a real milestone for us as a community because we didn't we didn't have many outlets. There was the FTM newsletter, which had by that time pretty much died out. Um, there was uh, Rocco's magazine, Rocco and Amos's magazine, Original Plumbing, and and that was great, but it didn't come out very often. So, of course, neither did the FDM newsletter. But by this time, in this time period, I think we were all looking for more, 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 and it was hard because it's we don't have a whole lot of money in the community. We don't have a whole lot of resources, and we've had to build. We've had to scratch out our livings in various organizations to and hope that we can have an impact. And all the work that I did for WPATH was uncompensated. 15 years on the board, 6 years in leadership, all uncompensated. And you know, basically that's it for me. So um, I'm proud of what I was able to contribute to this book and honored to have been able to offer that. And I hope that the rest of you will also feel that it stands the test of time. And I thank you.
Well, thank you, James, not only just for your contribution to the book, but also your contribution to our community all these years. It has made a difference. For those of you who don't know, we probably all, if we have health insurance that's covering our transition, we have Jamison to thank for it. So it's there's many ways in which he's impacted our community over the years. So thank you very much for that.
My pleasure.
All right. So it looks like when people get pinned, they do go big. So that's the way that's working. So hopefully people don't mind seeing themselves large on the screen. So the next person in line is Emmett Troxel. Emmett is the author of Standing on the Precipice. So Emmett, let's hear what's been going on in your life in the last 10 years. Let's say everybody has about 5 minutes, just so that we have good time for Q&A.
Great. I'm setting a timer. So yeah, thanks for having me here, Zander and Tristan. I really appreciate it. So for me, I could say what hasn't changed. When I wrote the first draft of this story, I think I was 3 weeks into my medical transition. So it was very fresh for me. So there was no what happens after transition at this point. So the last 10 years has been that story for me. I got a divorce. I moved, which was a good thing. I moved across the country. I finished my college degree, and I made a major career change. I moved from working in finance to being the director of technology at the Trevor Project. And I don't think that I would have had the strength to do those things if I hadn't have one, transitioned, and two, put my name out there. If I look at the book in particular, there are a couple really good things that came out of it. So I had lost touch with a really good friend from high school, and she was doing a research project and read Manning Up and thought, this different first name, but this really sounds like the person I know. So she reached out on Facebook and we connected. She's the reason I moved across the country. She's like a chosen family for me. Her kids are like my kids, and it was really powerful that when I put my real name out there. When I put my name out there, it like sort of good things came in. And I think it's been really helpful. I think for me, sort of transitioning has been this like opening up of the fog to let me do things that are impactful. And now I just sort of want to give back, which is why I'm working at the place I work at. I also took in like a trans teenager who was being bullied. And so, he just finished his, he's graduating next week, and I'm very proud of him. He's not like my kid. His parents are great. He just can't be in this town that he's in. So yeah, that's been my life. I guess I don't recognize the person that I was 10 years ago, just because so many wonderful things have changed for me. So that was a little bit shorter than 5 minutes, but that's what's going on.
That's okay. That's okay. I mean, that was a very heartwarming story to hear about how you were reunited with an old friend. I'm so glad that that happened for you. That's really beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and people will have the ability to ask questions, so people, you'll be able to get, answer some questions as well. Okay, let's hear from Donovan Ackley. Donovan wrote the chapter Fearfully and Wonderfully Made.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Gosh, um, I think first for me to like say what's happened since then, I have to clarify that that was a story that for me as well, it was very brand new in transition. So the focus for me to getting in, I can't remember who invited me to be part of the project. It might have been, I don't remember. I won't even say. But it was an experience of brotherhood in itself to be invited to be part of this project when I was only, I think, a few months out. And it had been a very public spectacle. I know we're not supposed to rehash the past. I'm just going to say that chapter was really the story of my coming out and the aftermath of that, because I was a theologian at the time, and happened to be employed at an evangelical university, and I've been fighting for my entire time there for LGBTQ inclusion. But my coming out was it was a lot for them. uh, I'll just stop there. But what the story really focused on was how trans men from like all over the country and really all over the world reached out to me to be supportive. And it just blew my mind because I was never a lesbian. I've never been in a relationship with a woman, but I had been a feminist, and I'd experienced, support and community in that context that women have with each other, and I was really afraid to lose that. So what was it really like? It really what the story is about really is how that saved my life. Really, I was overwhelmed by loss, the loss of my career, public humiliation. It was media. It was a media story all over. It was just, you know, well, anyway, it was just a lot. I'm very private. I'm very shy. It's probably coming across now, socially awkward, not the person that wants to be in the spotlight at all, ever, or to be a spokesmodel for anything, and somehow for the evangelical world for a minute, I was that person, and it just was overwhelming to me. So trans men reaching out quietly and unconditionally, many of whom were not religious themselves or had religious trauma, but they didn't, they were still like the open-heartedness of trans men to just say, I see you, brother, and I'm here for you, and I know this is a hard journey. And so I'm getting choked up even thinking about, okay, I know we're supposed to talk about what happened after that. So the last 10 years, it's a lot, because my career was not something I could ever reestablish. Being there are trans men who are theologians, wonderful ones, one of whom reached out to me, Justin Tanis, so Cameron Partridge. I mean, both of them reached out to me right away. So it's not that people can't do that job. It's just for whatever reason, that hasn't been my path. One of the things that was part of my journey was getting sober. That was where I could no longer deny, that I'm a trans man, and I'm also intersex. So like that, all that stuff came up because I was getting sober. Um, but so peer support became very important to me, and I experienced that in trans community in an informal way. Long story short, those experiences helped me with some other people because I was in the media for a minute around religious trauma sorts of issues. Other trans people around the world were reaching out to me when they were suicidal, people of faith, especially, and they were in crisis about feeling like there was a conflict there. So, well, all I'm trying to get to is people were reaching out to me on Twitter, Facebook. At that time, I was trying to be of service because I had no job, and I was just thought, I'm in so much pain. At least if I can help somebody else, maybe we can support each other. Anyway, long story short, that all turned into Trans Lifeline. Trans Lifeline initially was just a bunch of us sort of working in this way together, in Facebook Messenger primarily, but realized there was such an overwhelming need at that time. Again, this is 10 years ago. Since that book was Manning Up came out, there was that moment of time where Trevor and the National LGBTQ Hotline weren't at least in terms of people that were reaching out to me and other trans people I knew, were saying, you know, I'm not getting the help I need. I'm coming off these calls feeling worse. So we just coordinated, you know, some just as a bunch of friends. We just used our personal phone. I mean, it sounds shady, you know, like we didn't know what the hell we were doing, but we just wanted to help other trans people. So again, long story short, in the intervening years, you know, we realized we needed to formalize. We had hoped I had hoped there wasn't going to be a need for this. I'll say it that way. We didn't formalize. We launched it without a structure because we thought as soon as Trevor sees the need for this, as soon as National LGBTQ Hotline sees the need for this and how many calls we're getting, I'm sure they're going to, you know, absorb this peer support network or whatever. Now I've gone into a trans lifeline story. I'm sorry. Anyway, that was the thing that I did. And now I'm out of time, but I've done other things since then. But I'm always glad for trans community, trans men's brotherhood, and I'm still clean and sober today. So, and I definitely I would not be experiencing that without trans men who have been mentors on that journey to me. So with that, I stop and thank you all.
Thank you, Donovan. No, that was beautiful. You know, when I received when I did letters from my brothers and I received submissions from people who had religious backgrounds, it was I was so happy that those came in because, you know, I went to seminary. I have a master's in theology, so I'm very keen on this topic. And it didn't really dawn on me that there would be a whole lot of people that were from our community who would have something positive to say on the topic. So, and then when you submitted for Manning Up, I was like, here we go again, right? So thank you for that, because I do think that there are a lot of us in the community who have had unfortunate experiences or even traumatic experiences with communities of faith or religious institutions, our families. And so when perhaps for some of those people, when they can read a story that has some sense of hope and healing in it, that it can be a source for them as well. So thank you for that. All right, let me turn my phone back on so I can see who's next. Next we have is Michael Woodard, the author of the chapter Manning Up. Michael, how's it been going?
Oh, well, hey everybody. It's good to see those of you I already know, and good to see some faces that I had not yet seen before, even 10 years later. Um, things are going well here in Seattle, which is not where I was when I submitted my submission. Well, let me start my timer here. And I probably will ramble on for 5 minutes and not really say anything important, but my you told a little bit about the story of how the chapter or the book came to be called Manning Up. And when you sent me that email and said, hey, do you mind if we call the book Manning Up? And I was like, well, sure, why not? I think I said something like, does that mean I have to change anything? And you're like, nope. I'm like, okay, cool. Yeah, and that was because my a therapist that I had at the time, well, not at the time of the writing it, but about 5 or so years into my transition, I was really struggling with something and not wanting to admit that I needed to change and all this stuff. And she's like, well, you just need to man up. And I'm like, right? Like that's like really bad gender language, like you shouldn't be saying this, So anyway, that's that story. And my chapter is really a lot about personal integrity, because I didn't have much when I was younger and before I transitioned. I cheated a lot and I lied a lot, and I didn't feel like I was a very good person. Um, and I was always searching, like what something to, I think I even literally said, the next person to like take me away, like the Calgon commercial, right? Because I was so unhappy. And then my friend Holling was like, hey, I'm gonna do this. And I was like, holy crap, you can actually do something like that. I had no idea. I grew up in Indiana and it was very conservative and sheltered, and everything that happens in California happens later in Indiana, like 10 years later, and all that stuff. So I was shocked and everything. And then but right before that, I had done this whole personal empowerment thing called The Experience. And it kind of opened my eyes to different ways of being in the world and moving about in the world. But the biggest thing I learned was just to listen and pay attention, because I was so busy just trying to get by and survive, and that I just didn't really know. I didn't know what I didn't know, obviously. So after I transitioned, I have really tried to keep listening. And um, what still rings true to me is this community, not just trans masculine folks, but trans folks in general. We just really need a lot of help and support, and not because we are inferior in any way. It's just that we're so misunderstood, and so I have tried desperately, sometimes desperately, to keep working in the trans community, inspired by folks like Jamison and other folks that continue to do this work. There's been a couple times when I've had to step out and do something different, but in fact, when I wrote this, I think I was in grad school and I was working on my master's in public health. And when I was little, I wanted to be a doctor, but I didn't, I got all those messages about, women and doctors, and like, we couldn't do that because we were women, right? Or whatever we were anyway. And so when I decided to go to grad school, I chose public health because I'd been spending a lot of time doing trainings and Trans 101s and everything, and a lot of direct service stuff. And I was like, I need to get into where I can talk to the people with the white coats and the people with the people that made the policies, not the ones that had to act them out or act on them. So that's why I went with public health. Policy and management was my sub degree or whatever. And I also got a certificate in collaborative governance, because there's so much conflict in our community that I wanted some tools to help resolve some of that conflict. And that has come in just as handy as the public health degree, actually, in some ways more so, even though it was just a semester or two of study. But anyway, long story short, I've continued to work in the community, and so that's my 5 minutes. I moved to Seattle to work for Gender Odyssey, and I was the director of that conference for 3 years. Then the conference left town, and I had to go to California because I wanted to stay in trans work. And I worked, helped start a new trans health health clinic that was part of a large federally qualified health center. I did that for 2 years, and then the pandemic happened, and my spouse and I got married, and they were still up here in Seattle. So I came back to Seattle, and now I'm the executive director of a new organization called Traction, of which I'm a co-founder. And Traction stands for Trans Community Action, and we are all about bringing folks together to build community and do service projects and things, like sort of like the Sisters of the Perpetual Indulgence, but for trans folks. And I can say a lot more, but I won't because I'm already over time. So good to see everybody.
Thank you, Michael. Well, do you get to wear fun get-ups like the sisters?
Well, we haven't yet, but anything's possible.
I want to see you in one of those get-ups.
Right.
Oh my God. I don't know if I think we probably talked about this back when I received the submission, when you were talking about your experience with the experience, that I had grown up as an est kid, and so with my dad as an est trainer, so
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I grew up in that kind of environment. So
Yeah.
excellent.
Yeah, it was est for queers. It was exactly
That's right. That's right. Okay, I don't see Max here yet, so let me move on. So the next author that's going to be giving us an update is Lauren Cannon. Lauren wrote the chapter Masculine Vulnerabilities, Human Connections. Hey, Lauren.
Hey, thanks, thanks, Zander, and it's great to see everybody's face. A lot of you I've a little bit familiar with your work, but but yeah, that was the name of my chapter. The first name of it was, I had to write it. I couldn't find. Long story short, the book is at my office at work, and I couldn't find it, so I was trying to find it on my computer, and it started off being called vulnerability dialectics. And I'll say maybe a wee bit about the chapter again, not reading it or anything, and about what's happened in the last 10 years, which seems incredible. I don't know how that happened, but I teach philosophy at a Cal State University. Used to be called Humboldt State. Now it's called Cal Poly Humboldt in Northern California, way up almost to the border of Oregon, right on the coast. So the sun's going to set here in a minute, and I'm going to look funny. But I must have just been teaching Sartre when I wrote this chapter, when I was thinking about this chapter, and in the sense of thinking about acknowledgement and recognition for who we are, who we think we are, and how that can't really be done in isolation, that we depend on each other, right? And that means not just other trans folks, but our broader community. They're like, wow, are you seeing me like I'm seeing me? Like, is someone going to see me and acknowledge that understanding of myself? And I think a lot of us, you know, go through that. And even though it was about 10 years into my transition, my essay was about navigating spaces with basically a swimming pool and a men's um, gender non gender non inclusive. I guess I would say gender non inclusive changing and showering facilities, and kind of navigating that idea about, like, am I going to be recognized as a man? Do I have to surveil people to be safe? In the sense that I'm my body wasn't conforming exactly to what that they were might be expecting. And through the story, kind of what happens is, at one point, and it's a true story, at one point I think maybe I am being clocked. Oh, I didn't look at the time when I started. Okay, I'll be careful. I was worried that I was being clocked as trans, that this might not be safe, right? And what do I do? And like, I had those kinds of ideas going, and as it turned out, the person that I initially anticipated or thought might be not safe or dangerous was a person looking to me for acknowledgement. Like, am I acknowledging them? They weren't a trans person, but a special needs person. But they were looking to me for acknowledgement, right? Am I showing up? Can I talk to them like a big brother, in a sense? And I guess that's what and I think a lot of us, and Xander, you and I have talked about this, like growing up maybe in feminist spaces or lesbian feminist spaces, that cis men and men are the other. I'm like, oh, like, am I the other? And how does that work? So anyway, since that time, I think I still work at the same place. And I've seen generations and generations of my students who are trans or gender non-binary identified, and realizing, like, wow, I'm in a place where I'm not surveilling, my surroundings for safety. Generally, I pass as a a cis guy for the most part. And I really am in a position to recognize and acknowledge others. And so I that's kind of what I take from the little story, until now. And I don't think about being acknowledged or recognized as a man anymore, just because, like, I got a lot of shit to think about, and that's not really high up there anymore. But since then, like I said, I work at the same place, and I've worked very much with my university in terms of trans inclusion. Also, my union, yay CFA, you know what I'm talking about, Theo. That, like I'm very, very working very carefully in my union and having that meet for trans inclusive. And I did write a book a couple years ago that just came out in paperback. And I do a plug. It's called the politicization of trans identity, in looking at what has happened basically between the Obergefell ruling and the Bostock ruling of the Supreme Court, when we got same-sex marriage, and then it was seen that discriminating on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity is actually sex discrimination. So the backlash against our community between those two rulings is kind of what my book is about. So yeah. So I think I'm less looking for acknowledgement, and now I just feel like there's so much work to be done. Let's get to it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lauren. Lauren knows this, of course, but for those of you, I was up in Gettysburg last year at Gettysburg College, and I'm sitting down at a table ready to eat lunch or dinner, and I meet this young man named Roman, and it turns out he's a student of Lauren's. And I was like, what
Yeah.
a small world.
Yeah. And when I was doing I'm a philosopher, so I don't really like empirical investigations, but Roman helped with the empirical stuff on my book quite a bit. And yeah, I totally forgot about that. Yeah,
That's right.
there was a couple of undergrads. I'm not in a position to have a research assistant, so I just kind of paid them out of my own pocket, but helped me keep track of stuff. Yeah, it is a very small world.
Yeah, well, not only that, but it's an example of what you were saying about how now you're looking around and you're providing, that visibility for other, even for the younger, members of our community. So that's just a good example there. Thank you, Lauren. All right. So let's see who I have next. Well, next is Tristan, because not only is he the managing editor or manager of Transgress Press, he also contributed a chapter to Manning Up. His chapter is called Not a Caricature of Male Privilege. Tristan, let's hear from you.
Okay, I'm trying to, let me remove, you guys can see me just fine, right? With Lauren up there at the same time, right? It's fine. Here, let me just make it. So I think, with my piece, I when you read it, it's a lot of anger in it. I was in a very angry place. Um, Figured out some things to do with that anger, rather than to turn it inward. I wrote a lot about what it was like to transition to Black manhood, and to be to suddenly have police coming after me, or just approaching me in really weird, confrontational ways. um and what was angry, that's angering in of itself. It's threatening, it's debilitating mentally, emotionally, over time. But there was another layer of it too, with after, it was difficult to have conversations with people, um in my previous sort of connections, particularly in feminist scholars, for example, in my work. It's difficult to have conversations with people that felt that I wanted support from and understanding, because this had been my community before that, and some of them were, but then some of them also were sort of put off by my, they couldn't understand sort of, why do men complain so much, and they completely sort of miss the race piece. But for me, it was quite a jolting experience to transition, because in many ways it was kind of contradictory. On one hand, you sort of embraced a pathway for myself of self-realization, of truth, self-understanding, and one that was open, and for me to take that path in any way that I wanted at the time. But also going down that path of transition also made me more visible to violence, and to people making, just really bad assumptions about Black men. And of course, I didn't have that. I didn't get the schooling, so to speak, or the learning. I didn't go through the learning experiences that my Black and brown cisgender brothers had gone through, and for whom they had not only sort of learned how to deal with police and tactics and little things you do to sort of stay alive, but in many ways, because they've been socialized into knowing that, when you're 6 and you're 8 and you're 9 years old, Black man, you're a threat to, you could be, perceived as a threat to white people, even at that young age. For them, that truth and that realization had settled in a long time ago. For me, I was just coming into it and didn't know what, sort of looking for a place to kind of grab onto for survival. So what's changed is that well, the America hasn't changed. Well, not necessarily for the better. Like, at least we did the piece in book came out 2014. So as you all very well know, at that point we also had an explosion of media coverage of black men being killed and black women too and by police officers. And so that hasn't changed. I still get a fair amount of I had a very horrible experience in Los Angeles where and I'll just tell you here and then I'll tell you sort of how I shifted. In 2018, I had to go to LA for a conference and I had been like 2 weeks, 3 weeks prior to that, I was hit by a truck when I was on my bicycle. And so I was in busted up in pretty bad shape. But I had been wanting to go to this conference for the entire year. I'd been looking forward to it. I'm also a person, you knock me down, I get back up, unless I just really can't. So I wasn't aware that I really probably shouldn't have gone to the conference because I actually turned out I had a torn up shoulder and I had to have surgery. But that's important to the piece because when I got to Los Angeles, it was evident that I was not going to be able to go through that week-long conference as it's intense pain. So I had to turn back around and come back. And so on my way back at Los Angeles airport, I ran into problems at the security checkpoint. And usually it's around race or the color of my skin or something like that. I feel like it's a case because I can sort of see the behavior. But this case, I don't know if you guys have know that, but I had surgery, and so I have an erectile pump that in my penis in the scrotum area. And so the guy, when I went through the little picture thing, I think it showed up and so he wanted me to go into this room and disrobe. And so for me, first of all, I know what the law is, but then for me also, I took umbrage to that. And the reason I told you about the pain was because I was not in any mood to be fucked with that night. And that's why it ended up turning ugly. So I ended up, he asked me to go in this room and I could tell he was a rookie, young guy, didn't really know. And he seemed kind of nervous, had nervous energy. And so I went into this room and he asked me to take down my pants. I said, "You out of your fucking mind. I'm not taking my clothes off for you." So it turned into this ugly mess. So he got really silent. I said, "You go get your supervisor and then we'll have a conversation. But I'm not taking off anything in front of me. I don't even know who you are." And I just want to tell you guys this. So for those of you who don't know me, normally I would not speak like that to a person in a position because they can take you down. You see the examples in the media, but I was in so much pain that night. Pain will change your personality, and it did. I just snapped, and I went off on the guy, and then another gentleman came running in, a much older man. He looked like I think he was a supervisor. He was a black man, and he came in. He said, "What's going on? What's going on?" I said, "This fool over here is trying to get me to take down my pants. He's a sicko, the fucking sicko. I'm not taking down anything." And he looks at the guy, and with this look of disbelief and protest, like, "Why are you doing this to this man?" And the other guy just kind of backed up and he said, "Well, that's not really what happened." That but I'm sternly like just cursing and going at it because I just had it. So finally, in a couple minutes, the older man who came in, he said, "Just go on, leave." And he said, "You stay. We'll have a conversation later." So I got through that, but that was the first time I'd ever been in an experience where I'd actually read other trans men who had been through that and had been treated like that at security checkpoints. And so that was for me, I think, kind of a turning point. And I felt like, America, it's not going to change how it deals with black people or brown bodies. But I needed to kind of shift in where I put my energies. And so one of the things I stopped doing is kind of looking for support from feminist or lesbian community. I found, guys, reached out to my brothers. I reached out to other cisgender black men who were very helpful and very supportive. And it was really nice to just hear other people's stories, even though we knew we couldn't really change the system. At least you knew that was all of us in some sort of in the boat together, and that we could help each other out with knowledge and things like that. So, what eventually happened for me is that I don't let the negativity from, you know, the treatment, how people engage me or how they seem like they're going to engage me. I just try not to let that settle in on me. And I since then, you know, I've well got a divorce, but that was a good thing. But we're still friends. So my in fact, that's where I'm sitting right now at my ex-wife's place where I'm staying here in the Bay Area. So it was a very positive conscious decoupling. I am happy to report that I am going to retire next year. I finally just decided to stop working. I'm and pursue my own dreams. And I always wanted to be an architect and an artist. That's really what I wanted to be when I was little in life. And so when I go back and I have this whole side of me that is creative and imaginative and thinks in colors and shapes, and nobody really knows that because you know me as an academic and an analyst. So but there's a whole nother part of me that needs to be nurtured. And so I decided to just, I've worked enough for institutions, and I decided to retire next year. And I bought a house in the Virgin Islands and just kind of loving life down there.
Very cool. Thank you, Theo. Check out the chat box because Lauren is sharing that
Oh,
they use your story in their trans theory class.
oh,
So
well, let me also just say this too. I'm so glad you say that because I've taught manning up different parts of it. I've taught all the stories in some class or another, and for like years. And when Jamison started his talk with talking about, you know, how he wanted to write for a story, but he wrote this preface. I just want you to know, Jameson, like I use that preface in so many different classes, you have no idea, and I pair it with other works. And there's just I've taught Lauren's masculine vulnerabilities. I've actually gotten quite a bit of course usage out of the book, and I hope that my students, I think in turn, I think that they have. It's also been really good to educate them about the insides of our lives. So thank you.
yeah, very cool. Yeah, I've actually heard over the years from a number of professors around the country that use manning up in their classes. So
Cool.
it's actually become a book that's used in that way. You know, Tristan, I'll never forget the day I was waiting for you on that the BART platform at that last Oakland stop before it goes under the bay.
Yeah,
And you had said, I'm leaving the house. I'm going to go by the post office and I'll meet you on the platform. And all of a sudden I was like, why is it taking so long? And I could hear sirens and the choppers above. And lo and behold, you know, Tristan or Theo left his house wearing one of those vests that has the weights in it, you know, so he could get a little workout. And somebody called the police thinking he was wearing a bomb vest. Yeah.
yeah,
And so I was
they
like, where are you? What's happening?
just
Oh my
yeah,
God. It was crazy. It was crazy being profiled in that way,
yeah,
in West Oakland. Yeah.
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 Especially
Mm.
when you don't really know the landscape, but you know,
Hmm.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank y'all. I
Thank,
appreciate it.
yeah, thank you. Okay. Next up, we have Laura Dickey, whose chapter is called Privilege. I seem to have it. Now what? Looking forward to hearing more from you, Laura.
Thanks, Zander. It's nice to see everybody here. Lots has changed for me in the last 10 years. I retired be 3 years ago now for health reasons, mental health reasons. And that's led me into a life with quite a bit of uncertainty, certainly financially. But I've managed to figure out how to make ends meet and get to the end of the month without the money running out. So I'm no longer working. I had already graduated from my doctoral program when I worked on this piece, and was at the time doing lots of writing on different things because I was a college professor at the time, and there's that old publisher perish theme. So my impetus for writing about privilege was hearing trans men talk about not having privilege, especially white trans men talking about not having privilege. And I wanted to say to them, the whole thing about unearned privilege is that you didn't do anything to earn it. And all we did is start taking testosterone, and all of a sudden I was getting promotions that I had asked for previously with this employer and hadn't gotten when I was female bodied. So in terms of the privilege piece, nothing has really changed for me over the years. Since I wrote that piece, I have to be careful how I walk in the world because it's easy for me to take up more space than I mean to. Um, I don't know what else to say. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. That's
all
what I
right.
have for you today.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that, what you shared. I was trying to remember what year it was that I was at the Forge FTM conference in Milwaukee, and you did a
2007.
presentation, 2007. Yeah. And I remember I think that's where we met, was at
Yeah.
that conference, and you had presented on that topic. And I'm thinking maybe I reached out to you and asked you if you wanted to write about that for the book. I can't remember if it was what you suggested or if I actually wanted you to submit specifically that, but I'm happy either way. It's too far back to remember for my brain. I don't know about yours.
Yeah, mine too. Mine too.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that you came today.
Yeah,
Thank you, Laura.
glad to be here.
All right, who do I have next? Let's see. I don't see Lance. Is Cameron here? I don't know if they're maybe off camera and I just can't see them. But I don't see them here. So the next author is Willie Wilkinson, who is the author of the chapter Sculptor. Hi, Willie.
Hey, Zander, Tristan, everybody. Nice to see you all here. Thank you, Tristan, for sharing that story. And, it's interesting, this anniversary, because just the other day I got asked by a reporter to comment on 10 years since the publication of the Time magazine article, The Transgender Tipping Point. Y'all remember that with Laverne Cox on the cover? And, at the time, I thought that was such a celebration, like we've come to this place. And I reread the article and I'm like, damn, this is disturbing language. I felt like it was really this kind of freakish curiosity, this profound ignorance, this kind of unexamined entitlement of a cisgender reporter, which was really kind of indicative of the times. And so it just really made me think about how far we've come in 10 years. And as someone who's been training people on trans issues for 35 years, I feel that, we have seen a positive transformation. I've observed that with health providers and educators and business professionals, as well as journalists and legislators and artists. And, so I feel like we have so many more allies. What was viewed as respectful at the time, under the guise of homage was really, I find really inappropriate at this point in time. And so, I think but 10 years ago, I never could have imagined that health providers were going to be continually receiving death threats, that affirming parents were going to be threatened with having their kids taken away from them, that there would be so many restrictions on our ability to go to school and healthcare and throughout society. People just trying to exist in public and pee in peace, and having that be up for debate. And that we'd be used as a tool to dispose of democracy, really on a global level. And so I want to place this moment in history because I feel like, we're survivors. We have so many more people who are standing with us, and yet we're dealing with this horrible backlash. For me, I published my book, Born on the Edge of Race and Gender, A Voice for Cultural Competency, in 2015. And I have been able to do a lot of speaking engagements. Folks are using my book in college campus, college classes, and speaking around the country about various aspects of this, public health, where I come from in terms of, working from in HIV/AIDS in the early days of the AIDS epidemic, and trans healthcare access, and also talking about being a trans person from a Chinese American perspective and a mixed heritage perspective. In 2014, we got the Affordable Care Act, which really gave us discrimination protections in healthcare on a federal level. And in California, we got medical providers and insurance coverage. And yes, truly one of the greatest victories of the trans movement. That's been an interesting arc for me. I do want to say that I consider my transition having started in 1972 when I changed my name to Willie. And it was a long process for me. I got into a relationship with someone in 1995 who wanted a man in a woman's body. And for me, that felt sort of right. But I never really identified as female. And so for me, I really, after 5 decades of living in a female body, really felt I needed to medically transition. And so in 2014, when this book came out, it was really on the eve of my fallow journey. And I have to say, fallow changed my life. And yes, I do get felt up at the fucking airport. So, TSA's all over that shit. But, for me, it was really that alignment of body to soul that, I have absolutely no regrets in that, quest for bodily autonomy was really profound for me. But also the catalyst for the most traumatic experiences of my life. My ex-wife broke up our family because of my fallow. I experienced over $500,000 of financial abuse under threat that she would take the kids away from me and turn them against me. In the divorce process, I was vilified and pathologized and endured many false accusations at the intersection of racism, transphobia, and ableism. And I lost custody of my kids. And so, it's been a very challenging experience. It's been a rough pandemic. And no one really should have to choose between being themselves and being a father, or to do what any parent wants to do to protect the health and well-being of your kids. And I know I'm not alone. 50% of trans people experience intimate partner violence. Anecdotally, I wonder if that stat's actually higher. I know many trans men and trans masculine people have had their relationships with their children interfered with because of medical transition and divorce. And the psychological abuse that kids in these relationships endure is profound and complex. So for me, I had to use my inner strength that I, had to live to really be myself as a trans child who got no support or very limited support. I didn't meet my first trans masculine person until I was 32, which is half of my life. And in this experience, I became very isolated. I hid from the internet for like 4 years until recently. And I think, whether we're experiencing intimate or institutional violence, um, you know, the goal of our abusers is to take away our sense of self and identity. And so I think it's really our healing work to remind ourselves of who we really are. So I wrote this book, which I released more recently, called Gender Splendor: 50 Creative Sparks to Celebrate Yourself at All Ages and Stages. And it's really about, my response to the mental health crisis among trans, non-binary, and gender expansive folks, and how to use creative expression as a healing tool, to really remind ourselves of how extraordinary we are just for being ourselves, and to really, remind ourselves of our brilliance and resilience. For me, part of what that has been about is organizing my community. Just last night, in Oakland, I had organized and hosted this event called Change Champions. It was intergenerational API transmasculine activists. And we have folks from age 25 to 63, a lot of wisdom. This was for QTAPI Week, which stands for Queer Trans Asian Pacific Islander, which is at the intersection of API Heritage Month, May, and Pride Month, June. And also, I'm organizing API Transfusion. Our registration just gone live, apitransfusion.com, which is a retreat coming up on the July 4th weekend, 4-day weekend. For API transmasculine folks. So that's really exciting. I'm doing the opening keynote at the Rhode Island Trans Health Conference next Saturday, June 1st. So that's exciting. And yes, I am going to go to Philly Trans Health for folks that are talking about that. I'm excited about that as well. And, I think we always have to find that place, trans joy. I recently went to Camp Lost Boys, and we ended up dancing in our underwear in a yurt, in bumfuck, Colorado. And so, like, to me, that's, we got to always find those places, celebrate trans joy.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Willie.
Thank you.
And thanks for sharing your books, and also about the events that you have had and are having coming up. I really appreciate that. Of course, it's not to override the heartbreaking, experience that you've also had. So, but thank you for sharing, that with us, feeling like this was a space you could do that. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
I just want to mention, when we were talking earlier about the 50 and up group that Jamison is moderating, along with a couple of other trans men, that he says he's typically the oldest. He's the oldest guy there, but there is another guy who showed up last time. His name is Jude Patton. He's in his 80s, and Jude is joining us here today. So I just want to say thank you, Jude, for being here. Jude is a true pioneer, in the sense of when he started his advocacy work, long before most of us or any of us did, I'm sure. I think even Jamison, just because of the age difference. So I just want to acknowledge that he's here, and I want to thank him for being here.
Thanks,
All
Zander.
right.
Thanks,
You're-
Zander.
You're welcome. Okay, so we have two more authors to go. The next is Aaron Devor, Dr. Devor, who wrote the chapter Family Man. All right, Aaron, let's hear from you.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you all. Thank you for inviting me. So, yeah, my chapter is called Family Man, and I wrote about my family and about how being trans helped me to have a larger family and more connection. But the reality is that I've been married to the same woman for 34 years. And so I've had family, and I have the family of my origin. And so my story was about how I never thought I would have children or grandchildren. And my own parents had died before I transitioned. And so through my wife, I acquired a son and 2 grandchildren and a mother-in-law and a father-in-law. And that was really important to me. Now I continue to have my brother. He's in my life. And I have many other family members. But the story was really focused on that part of it, how I got to be a dad and a son and a grandson and a grandfather. So in the 10 years since sadly, I've lost a lot of those people. And so the circumstances are very different. I still have my wife. We're still together, and we have a very strong relationship. But I lost both of the people who were my mother-in-law and my father-in-law. Last year, we lost our son, and one of the brother-in-laws that I acquired through my wife also has died since then. So the 10 years in between has been difficult, and the relationship with the grandchildren is not great, and it's really not something that I want to go into in this forum, but I will say not great. So what I wrote about, some of it has been very stable, has been very rewarding, and some of it has been traumatic and really difficult. So rather than focus on the really difficult, I want to talk more about some of the good things that have happened in the last 10 years, because, in some ways, the last 10 years have been the best years of my life. And in terms of losing a son, that's probably as bad as it gets. Right? So that was, and we lost him to drug overdose. So, very tragic. As I say, I don't want to focus on that. But the other aspects of my life have been probably as good as it gets. And so in the last 10 years, I've been able to serve the community in ways that I never would have imagined, and that have been tremendously rewarding for me. And from what I hear from other people, have been rewarding to other people as well. And so in these 10 years, 2014, the year that we published this book together, was the year that I started the Moving Trans History Forward conferences. And at the time that I started those, and please, you're all invited to come. The time that I started those, I thought it was just going to be one in 2014. And people said to me, when's the next one? I'm coming. Or I couldn't make it to the first one, I'll be at the next one. And I realized that this had to continue. So we've now done 2014, 2016, 2018. We went to do 2020, but COVID closed us down. We did 2021, we did 23, and we're now in the planning stages for 2025. And they just keep getting bigger and more what I had hoped they would be. And what I'd hoped they would be is they're conferences that are by design half community members and community like everyday people and half academics, and bringing all those folks together. And they're very intergenerational. The last conference, we had kids of like 4, 6, and Jude comes to our conferences, and you've already heard how old Jude is, and we got everything in between. And so to me, that's really important, is bringing the generations together. Also really important is bringing in all the different aspects of our communities. And so we have trans masculine, we have trans feminine, we have non-binary. We have people who identify themselves as cross-dressers, people identify themselves as transsexuals. As Jamison was saying, there are people who think those words are terrible and don't want anybody to ever use them again. And I try and put them all in the room together and get people to talk to each other. And one of the things I'm proud of is we've so far, I know you can't guarantee anything going forward, we so far have never had wars at these conferences. People listen to each other, they talk to each other. And so, that's been a big accomplishment that I'm very proud of. 2016, we started the Chair in Transgender Studies. Oh, and I want to say about the conferences also, they're very international. So the last conference was fully hybrid, and we had people, partly because it is hybrid, we had people from 23 countries around the world, and there were 470 people in attendance in total. So we'll see what happens next time. Stay tuned. 2016, we started the Chair in Transgender Studies. And when I first started talking about that, which is, around 2014, everybody said, can this be done? And I said, can this be done? And I was very doubtful it could be. But as some of you, many of you, I don't know that it did happen. And that project brings together, again, people from all over the world and tries to bridge between community and academics and get academics to listen to community and community to listen to academics, because I think we all have a lot to teach each other. So we're constantly putting on social events and lectures and put on the conference. And then Transgender Archives has been running in the background, which started in 2011 and continues to grow. So those three make up big part of what I've been doing for the last 10 years. I teach, I have graduate students, I do research projects, I do a lot of policy advising. And so for me, that's a very important part of what I do because policies affect our lives big time. And so I get the opportunity to advise a lot on policies. On the personal level, one big thing that changed, in addition to what I said before, which was a happy big change, is my wife became a rabbi in 2019. And that has changed our relationship and my life because of the leadership position that she has in the community. And, just yesterday I met someone and we were at a wedding that my wife had just conducted. And she said, we're introducing ourselves. And I introduced myself as I'm the husband of the rabbi. Right? And she was one of those people who never asked me anything else. She wanted to know anything else about what my life was. So, and I'm happy to be able to have that role and to see my wife fulfilled and doing so much good in the world for other people. So, to support her is a big piece of what I do. And thank you. I didn't catch who it was. I guess somebody, maybe a couple of people sent their condolences about our loss. And yes, it was definitely difficult, but we've stood by each other and we'll continue to do that. And there's nothing better than having a partner in your life that understands you and who stands by you and who you can return the favor. So it's mutual. It goes both ways. Okay, I've exceeded my time. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Aaron, and thank you for sharing about your family. And thank you for all of the work that you've been doing. I know that I've had the privilege of being able to speak virtually at the conference now a couple times, so I appreciate that. One of these days, I'm going to be able to get up there or over there. I'm all the way in Florida now, so it'll take me a little while to get over there. But one of these days, I'll attend. I promise. It's one of my goals. All right, so our final author tonight is Scott Duane. Scott wrote the chapter Men Like Me. Hey, Scott.
Hey, it's great to see everybody. Lots of faces I haven't seen in a really long time. So this is so nice. Thank you for organizing it, Xander, and Tristan. Yeah, so my piece, Men Like Me, was about my struggle mostly with bottom dysphoria, and especially as it related to my sexuality as a gay man and the way that it would surface during, sexual experiences with gay men and just, at other times and the ways that I was trying to work through that. And a primary way that I worked through that I wrote about in the piece was in finding nude spaces. Nude yoga was a big thing that I wrote about, and also nude gay male spaces. And I ended the piece talking about going into metoidioplasty and having that. And I think I ended it kind of on an optimistic note of wonder, like what is this going to be like and how is my life going to change, kind of hoping for the better. And I will say that over the arc of the 10 years, my life is really wonderful now. I would say the last 5 years of my life have been the best years that I've had of my life. So, but there were some rocky points to get there. Pretty much very soon after I had metoidioplasty, I decided that wasn't it wasn't going to do it for me, and I wanted to move forward with phalloplasty. So I did that in 2014, shortly after the book came out. And although it changed my life in so many ways for the better, a lot like what Willie was saying, it changed my life it changed my relationship with my body in so many unexpected ways and in very positive ways. But it also had a lot of consequences for me. And the biggest consequence was that I was fired from my job pretty much right after I had phalloplasty. The week that I got back, they fired me from my job, essentially for pushing back for the ways that they dealt with my disability and, just some very fucked up transphobic and homophobic things that had happened to me at that job. And that basically led to about a year of my life just totally falling apart. My relationship at the time fell apart. I had to, move, find a new place to live. Obviously, I didn't have a job, and so I had to actually make a total career change and move into uh, software engineering, which is what I still do now, and I have a really thriving career in that field now. And I struggled with opiate addiction. I was kind of in the era where like overprescribing was still going on. Dr. Crane is great in a lot of ways, but he can be real loose with the prescription pad. And so that is something that I have thankfully been clean from since 2016. So I'm very grateful that I was able to get through that. And yeah, and I also began and finished a lawsuit which lasted 4 years. The EEOC ended up picking up my case and suing the company on my behalf. They would not settle, and we went all the way to a trial, a federal trial, and we lost to a jury. So, but I still consider that experience very much worth the fight. One thing that I really took from that experience was that it's worth fighting for the right thing, even if the result is maybe not what you would want it to be. It's still important to put that voice out there and to move the needle in whatever ways that you can. And advocacy, like the feeling of being advocated for, is so powerful. Like I still think of my lawyers who took me through all of those 4 years and worked on my behalf in such incredible ways. That feeling of advocacy is something that will stick with me for the rest of my life. So those were the hard things. But right around the time that the lawsuit was wrapping up, something else entered my life, which was modern dance, which was something that I never expected to have any interest in. But I walked into a class that was taught by Sean Dorsey, who some of you might know at least who he is or have seen his work. He's a very prolific modern dance choreographer, trans modern dance choreographer. And he used to teach classes for terrified trans beginners. So it was like no experience required. So I went with the two people that I was dating at the time. It was this crazy trans triad, and we had this cute little first date at a modern dance class. And I just fell in love. I totally fell in love with the art form. And my life since then has changed so that it entirely is like basically focused around dance and theater and performance. And to me, that really makes sense because the thing that I wrote about in Manning Up was really about embodiment. And dance seems like sort of the natural kind of conclusion of that. It's such a pure form of embodiment and, making this relationship with our bodies work because like this is the one we got. And, we have to play that instrument in whatever ways that we are able to play it. The way I have kind of talked about it and think about it is that dance is the language that my gender and my body speak to each other. So it's just been a really wonderful thing to be able to enter this like really amazing dance community that we happen to have in the Bay Area and have so many. I've had the opportunity to have some really amazing experiences with both with training. Training is very easy to access here because there are a lot of amazing dancers that teach open classes. So I train every day, and I've also had the opportunity to meet some amazing choreographic mentors. I danced for a queer men's company for a couple of years. And that actually was kind of brought me full circle to my Manning Up, the story I wrote for Manning Up, because this particular company was led by this prolific choreographer who does a lot of nude work and dance. And so he and I really connected artistically and creatively, and we really shared this thread of feeling like nudity is a really powerful thing. It's a powerful creative tool, and it's a powerful tool to help people find a very particular kind of peace and a very particular kind of like being able to see themselves and feel at home in their own bodies. So a lot of my artistic work focuses around bringing nudity into dance. I actually just premiered a piece this weekend, a solo work that was about my transition, and it was kind of looking at my transition from the point where I was just on the cusp of it and really scared and really confused and just taking that leap of faith that most of us here are very familiar with, of like, all right, I'm gonna fucking do this crazy thing, to where I am now, and the ways that my life has changed in these small and subtle ways. And I performed it nude, and it was incredibly well received by an audience of mostly cis people. So that's, it really has struck me in the couple of days since performing that like, wow, to be able to do that, to sort of like bare my body in front of a room full of mostly cis people, and tell that story in this way with this art form. For me, that just I feel such gratitude to have been able to get to a place like that in my life through this like crazy road of transitioning, with all of the bumps and all of the work that it takes and all of those things. And it also just makes me think about how much is different from the time when I started to transition. Like, I couldn't have imagined in 2008 when I started my transition, which is like well after many of the people on this call, that that would be something that I would have access to in any kind of mainstream way. So yeah, so it's I don't know. I'm transition has in this particular journey, and the things that have happened for me has just made me into a total optimist. And I'm very happy and grateful to be a part of this very special experience and community with you all.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott. Check out the chats. People are chatting you up. Great story. It reminds me, one, I've known you since way back in that early day of your transition, but I also wanted to mention that, the image on the cover of Manning Up, that's a trans man named BJ, and BJ is a somebody that Scott and I knew. I'm not sure if you're still in touch with BJ. I'm not anymore. When we both lived in San Diego, Scott was involved with Visible Bodies Project, and BJ was a participant in that project. And so that's the image that was used in the project. And then towards the end of the book, there's a piece that has basically what BJ wrote about himself that accompanied his photograph. So you can see that in the book. So really cool guy from San Diego on the cover. He didn't contribute, but he was very happy to be on the cover and to have his little story included in the book. All right, so we have about 25 minutes or 24 minutes remaining. Let's go ahead and open it up for questions. Let's see if we can organize this in some way. So what I'm going to do is instruct you on, you should see towards the bottom of your Zoom screen, especially if you're on a laptop or a PC, works a little differently if you're on a phone, that there's a button that says reactions. And when you click on that button, you can hit the raise hand button. And then that puts your little hand up and it moves your picture to the top left-hand side of the screen. And then I can call on you, or Tristan or Theo can call on you to ask your question. It's just an easier way to organize it rather than having people raise their physical hand, because for some of you, your video is off, so we can't see if you're doing that. So yeah, so if people have questions. Yeah, Lucas, go ahead.
Okay. Do you still do edit additions to Manning Up, or?
No, after I worked on Manning Up, a couple years later, I worked on another book called Manifest, that was a collection of stories written by trans men on male privilege, that was published at Wilgefortis Press, which also published the Letters from My Brother's book.
Right.
I have, however, worked on my own book that has just come out, that is available. You can go to my website and see it, zanderkeig.com. I've written my first solo book that's
Right.
now
Good for
available.
you, man.
Yeah. I'm going to be giving out the Kindle version on June 1st. So don't pay for it if you can't afford it. But you'll be able to, on June 1st, you'll be able to go to my website, click on the link of the book, and it'll take you to Amazon, and you can get a free Kindle version of the book on June 1st. Yeah.
That's great. The reason I asked about if there's ongoing edits or not is because when you invited me to participate in that project, I was in a really dark place, and I knew that it was going to bleed through no matter, and so I'm just wondering what other projects are there, but I'm going to check out, the publishing website and see what's going on.
Yeah, you know, because Transgress Press is sometimes they put out calls that, you know, there might be other anthologies that people are working on. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay,
Theo,
thanks.
is anything coming up?
Have you been incarcerated lately? No.
No. Oh,
I was
sorry.
incarcerated as a female for being homeless and young and hungry. But yeah, not as a trans man. No.
No, we have I've been reading. I said that because we had a book that's coming out in the fall on
I
personal
noted
testimony
that.
by. Yeah.
But as a trans man, right?
Yeah.
Incarcerated
When,
as a trans man.
no, well,
That's okay. I don't want to write about that anyway.
yeah, the thing, yeah.
It's
But
a long time ago.
you should email me. I haven't heard from you in a while anyway, so it'd be great to chat and see what's up.
Gotcha.
Maybe,
Yeah, I will. Thank you,
some
man.
other projects. Yeah.
Yep.
Thanks, Lucas. I don't have the ability to put your hand down, so you'll have to put your own
Oh, I
hand
can do
down.
it.
Thank you. Thanks, Theo. Hey, Cody.
Hey, thank you everybody who shared. And I'm really excited. I ordered the book yesterday because I hadn't had a chance. Xander told me about it, and so I ordered it yesterday. So I'm looking forward to reading it. It's one of the books that I had not read yet. My question is for Aaron, and first of all, I'm so sorry to hear about your son. My brother lost his son 2 years ago, and it was devastating on the whole family. And I'm really glad that you have your wife, and a support group, because that's tough to get through. But my question was, can you tell us a little bit more about that conference? Because I've never heard of it, and I'm really interested in it, and I want to go to it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm very happy to tell you about it. So it happens every 2 years. It started out on the even years, now it's on the odd years. So next one is the end of March 2025. And we're trying to time it around Transgender Day of Visibility, but we do it over a weekend. So it starts on a Thursday evening. It goes 12 hours. Oh, thanks, Jay. There's just put the website up. It goes 12 hours on Friday, 12 hours on Saturday, and half a day on Sunday. And features a few special panels and then a lot of individual concurrent sessions where people talk for about 15 minutes each. The featured panels are the opening night is always something interesting. I can't tell you yet what it's going to be because we haven't completely decided, but some kind of interesting event and a speaker. And usually we open up with greetings from a lot of um, dignitaries. I think it's important for trans people to know that somewhere in the world, the Prime Minister will actually send you a letter saying, welcome to the conference, and that the Queen's or the King's representative in Canada will come to the conference and say, welcome to the conference. Some people don't think that's so great, but I think it's important to know that there are governments that actually think this is a good thing and are willing to say that. And then we start Friday morning with a panel of Two-Spirit trans people. And then we have a day-long concurrent sessions. Then we have a keynote in the evening. Again, I can't say who it is just yet. And we try and do one keynote that's kind of arts and one that's more intellectual. And then Saturday morning, we have an elders panel. Zander was one of our guests recently. And then we have all day concurrent sessions. We have visits to the transgender archives. We have another keynote speaker Saturday night. And then Sunday, we finish up with a youth panel. And we have 4 or 5 or 6 young people telling us about what like is, and what I mean by young people is teenagers. And last time, and I hope we'll do this again, we had an arts event where we got adults and little children together to produce some kind of artistic output that talks about their experiences together. So that's an overview of the conference. As I said before, it's completely hybrid, so you can come in person. If you come in person, it includes all the meals, and you can come online. Sorry, we can't feed you online, but you don't have to leave home. And for anybody who has any difficulty with the cost of it, we try and keep the cost way down. It's very streamlined. It's not fancy, but still. Thank you, Lucas. We try and keep the cost down, and there's subsidies available for people who need them. And it's a relatively painless process to get access to that. I mean, I could talk a lot more, you know, but the last time our keynotes were Chase Joint with Framing Agnes and several of the people who were in the film, and Julia Serrano. And we had Miss Major one time, and you've had an array of people whose names you would probably recognize. Again, I haven't figured out who it's going to be for 2025. We're just starting that process.
Thanks, Aaron. Is there anybody else who had a question for one of the authors? Or even just a statement if you'd like to make a statement? Yes, Aaron, go ahead.
Going to turn my camera on here. Hi, guys. I've really appreciated the conversation. And one of the things that has really resonated with me, with what many of you have said, is a feminist analysis on your own transitions and how you've made choices to move through the world as transsexual men. So I really thank you for that. The question that I have is related to that. I transitioned after being part of the lesbian community for many years. I was 33 when I transitioned, and have happily been a transsexual man for almost 20 years. But I still maintain very close ties with the lesbian community and the feminist community. And I do have concerns about ways in which our rights are being written into policy and law that are, from what I'm hearing from lesbians, a harm to them and their ability to have a voice and to advocate for themselves. And so I would love to hear some of you comment about how you think we can resolve that so that we can protect both our rights and the rights of lesbians and gay men and every letter of that alphabet to be able to advocate for ourselves individually as well as collectively.
Thank you, Aaron. Yeah, does anybody might take you a moment to gather your thoughts about it.
I have a comment.
Yeah, Willie, go ahead.
Well, while I have grief about not being supported as a trans child, I do feel when I was 18, coming out as trans was not an option for me. So I came out as a lesbian and I never identified as female. So I had to really come out as a woman, as a lesbian, as an Asian lesbian, as a lesbian of color. And I feel grateful that I experienced the women of color movement of the 80s. And I think one of the key things, for me as a feminism that really always struck was, biology is not destiny. So why is it that there's so many lesbians, who are saying that it is actually, And so I guess I want to understand more about what is that argument? How is it that our rights to bodily autonomy is interfering with lesbian rights to be? Maybe you can say more about what that argument is. But I do see that there are people who identify as lesbians or queer women who are very much transphobic and feel that somehow we are interfering with their rights to be. But I think it's all about giving everybody the space to really exist and be who they really truly are. And that to me doesn't interfere with anybody's rights for us to be who we are, to live as our authentic selves. So can you say more about what you mean in terms of that argument?
Well, I think there are many very reasonable lesbian feminists who are making that argument, probably better than I can present it here in a few words. Feminists like Kathleen Stock, for example, come to mind, who I have found to be very reasonable, but has raised some concerns, not about the existence of trans people, but about some of the specific ways things are being written into law and policy. So, I mean, if we do want to better understand where they're coming from, I would just encourage you to take some time to listen to what their concerns are and what they're trying to say, because they've faced enormous abuse and backlash for voicing those concerns.
But I mean,
thank you
what is your question? I mean, I mean, it's like, I'm just trying to understand what it is that you're getting at. Like, how is our existence or our basic human rights interfering with lesbian rights?
Well, I mean, I guess the question I would have is do you feel that, I mean, we come from a feminist lesbian perspective sometimes because of our socialization and our histories. I'm not sure that everyone who's transitioning is necessarily approaching their transition with the same degree of sensitivity and feminist analysis.
Can I just I'm sorry, go ahead, Lauren.
Yeah, Lauren, did
I
you want to respond to Aaron? Is that why you put your hand up? Do you mind, Theo? We'll let Lauren go.
No, go for it, Lauren.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, Theo. I'm not meaning
No,
to
no, no, your
jump
hand is up. Go ahead.
jump the line. And I appreciate the question, Aaron, and it is so much a part of the times that we live in, right now, and that's what has these kind of questions have fueled my analysis and my research and my writing for the last few years here anyway. Um, on my view, like I always want to go a step higher, not in hierarchy, but and not so much in abstraction, but I want to ask, like, wait a minute, who's pitting us against each other? Um, I do think that,
Yeah.
like looking at specific policies is really important, and I like policy work like a lot of the guys on here. Um, but I agree with Willie in the sense that we don't have to talk about false dichotomies or who's going to win the rights war, like respect and basic civil rights are a pie, and if we give it to some people we won't give it to others. I think there's really complex arguments out there, but kind of like when those folks who say like follow the money, I want to say something like that. Follow the money. Who is being benefited from us having arguments about splitting a pie of rights? And I think basically we know who it is. I mean, it's politicians who demonize us as a kind of pawn in their efforts to gain power and privilege, which of course is money. So I like to talk about that, and then in spaces that are compassionate and careful and being very careful about thinking and analysis to say like, okay, how do we figure this out? Because all of us trans guys are here, we're sure not going away, and our numbers seem to have just magnified, of course, as y'all know, in the last 20 years, that we're not going away, and some of these concepts aren't going away, but I want to look at who's benefiting, and that ain't us, and it's not lesbian feminists, and it's nobody but the politicians who are pitting us against each other.
Thanks, Lauren. Yeah, Theo.
Yeah, thank you, Lauren. That was very cogent. I sort of had a similar reaction. I don't see lesbians as my enemy unless they're out there trying to write policy so that I can't get my meds, or I can't get, like, I don't understand what my desire, you know, I want testosterone, head body type. What does that have to do with? I really would need to know the specific arguments more. And I think what I would ask is, the point of where does the first question begin? Because usually when you sit down, you want to sit down as a policymaker, an academic, or an analyst, you begin with a set of questions and you begin with a set of assumptions. And so I think I could better speak to that if I knew what those questions were, like what is the fundamental issue that's being explored. And I think Lauren brings up something that I hadn't thought of before, but we certainly seen that the past 5, maybe longer, maybe 5, 10 years in our politics, is money coming from elsewhere being thrown, into analysts, into groups and organizations. And it's not money from any of our crew. It's like that happened out here in California with the marriage equality. You had eight what eight $80 billion, $8 million or something came in from Nevada just to run an anti-marriage, and it worked. And it pitted blacks against queers, and all I could see historically was that both of these groups historically have had their right to marry um screwed over at various points in times, and none of those rights to marry are sacred just because you have laws. African Americans, you or any person of any race, from may get to a point you may not have interracial marriage here. It's not just queer people and trans people who the right to marry, but you see these two groups couldn't see their commonality because you had outside money coming from literally from Nevada and coming from South Carolina evangelicals. They were pumping millions, tens of millions of dollars into ads that roiled the Black community with transphobic, queer phobic messages, really kind of played on Black people's fears. You had the opposite going, and so I think that's a really good point to make about it's not just the ideology and the questions that you begin, the assumptions and where you want to take that argument, but the question is who's behind it also. Now, I'm not saying this person is getting paid, but I I'd like to know. I after what we saw with the last election and after what we saw with marriage equality, I know that our own politics are not even they're not even sacred within our own borders for that matter. So and I should have known this, but I guess it took a historical example to understand. So I think to me they're false dichotomy, the way that people can sometimes be misguided in the way they pose these. And sometimes also if you're somebody who's really angry or you've got some sort of score to settle, or maybe there's something you're not getting that you should, it's very easy for an outside group to come and rankle that, to poke that bear and get it riled up, and to make you think that so and so is your enemy and stuff. So I think there's a really really good points I think that Lauren made, to sort of check around the back of the room, the back of the house. It's not just the front of the house you're looking at, but there's a whole back of the house too.
Thanks, Theo. Thank you. And Aaron, I appreciate you asking the question. And I I also appreciate um your invitation to listen. When I was a teenager, I used to watch the 700 Club because I wanted to know what they were thinking and what they were saying and where that information was coming from. And I actually do subscribe to the Lesbian Project on Substack, and I do listen to Kathleen Stock and Julie Bindle's podcasts every time they come out because I want to hear the story. Now, these are two lesbians that are in Britain and Scotland, so there's some context there that's different from ours, but the laws are very different. But I love listening to those podcasts, and I think it's a good idea for us to listen to people that we might not agree with or who might be saying things that we don't want to hear. But I think we should listen to those things if you have the ability to hear other arguments. I invite you, like Aaron does, to listen to them. So Lucas said he wasn't going to raise his hand, but he had a question for Jamison. So Lucas, why don't you go ahead and unmute yourself? And then when you're finished, then we'll call on Michael and we might be at time at that point. So go ahead.
I just meant I wasn't going to raise my hand during that discussion because I didn't want to interrupt it with a different
it's okay.
track. That's all.
Yeah.
Jamison, I really appreciate you mentioning, how, I mean, it came up at the Zoom meeting a year or two ago that I think Aaron hosted on FTM International. Some of the old school, there was a panel, I think you were on it. And there was a guy from Canada, one of the Eastern provinces that was on it too, talking about this, those of us of an older generation of transitioners, particularly coming from a queer background, but not necessarily, who end up eking out a living because we've spent so much time creating a set of shoulders for everybody else to stand on, really, and just doing the work that it still sounds like we're all still doing, and in this context, regardless of the age of the people that are here. I mean, there's we all seem to have risen to the call of just trying to, in our own little corners, and certainly Jamison for you, in a much larger corner of WPATH, done what we can to improve the situation. Sometimes, I mean, I was a very reluctant activist at first. I was trying to, lobby for funding for lower surgery. It was being funded for non-trans men, but not for someone like me whose blood said testosterone, not estrogen, whose body from the waist up said, testosterone, not estrogen. But, I was all by myself, and it was brutal. And many years later, when there was a younger crop, a fresher, a more resilient crop came up, and was able to make that happen. And based in British Columbia, but that trans man from back east on that panel that I think Aaron did host, one of the early writers, contributors to FDAM International newsletter, talked about just financially sequestered, really, not for lack of ability, a lack of passion or motivation or capability, but just there's just it's a matter of keeping people on the planet, really, and ourselves first and foremost, but then that expands and we find a way that we can make ends meet if possible, and we keep on going. I mean, by the time I got my shit sorted out with my addiction and my gender, I was in my 40s, and it was either make a living now, just make ends meet, and thank God for housing, for subsidized housing at the time, or go back to school, which I always loved. I loved learning, and I still do, but I didn't have the bandwidth anymore. I knew I needed to just be self-sufficient as best as I could. And, listening to different guys here that are academics and that have managed to make a really resilient mark, I'm jealous. I'm in awe. And I'm so glad that it's expanding so much more, that, we have such a visible, footprint, on the larger, in the larger world, as well as the grassroots, small. I mean, my focus has been on parents of trans kids, because I want to keep those kids on the planet. And it's the parents that often get lost in the mix. The trans person is being focused on, but the parents are being missed. And I've been having rooms full of very freaked out parents from Christian and Muslim and Sikh backgrounds who, and communicating with them through those lenses of faith-based and cultural-based. The common thread is they all love their kids, and they want to keep them on the planet, but they've got so many layers to work through. And I'm, even though it doesn't pay much, I'm blessed with being able to wear a whole bunch of different hats. So it helps me feel secure in the air that I breathe, that I'm earning it. And I just, felt that again, Jamison, when you were talking. I just was really moved at the acknowledgement that there's so many of us here in this room, and so many unsung heroes as well, who are doing what they can in their corner for little or nothing, as far as financial remuneration goes. And I'm glad to see that that's changing. I just I wish some had trickled down, I guess. But anyways, it's really great to hear that acknowledged, I guess, is my long-winded emotional outburst there. Thank you for letting me subject you to me.
Thank you, Lucas. Since we did start a few minutes late because we were giving people an opportunity to get into the Zoom room, I'm going to go ahead and extend the time just slightly. I understand if you need to leave, but Michael had his hand up, and I'd like to give him an opportunity to say what he was going to say. Michael. You have to unmute, Michael.
So sorry, I've been trying to behave myself and be quiet, and here I go. My question is really just for you, Zander, or well, for anybody that knows. I'm speaking of age and getting on in the world. Do we know if we've lost any of our authors of our chapters? I was very, very distraught to hear about Lauren Cameron's death, and that book was so transformational for so many of us. And learning why and what happened to him and everything. And I just wondered if you happen to know if we've lost any of the authors of Manning Up.
Not that I know of. Most everybody responded back.
Okay.
There was one author that lived in the Middle East that I didn't even have good contact with back then. He was mostly going through Theo, so I don't know. I was looking to see if Matt Cayley was a contributor because we have lost Matt Cayley, but he didn't contribute, but he did provide a blurb on the back
Right.
from, but not as far as I know. No.
Good. Everybody keep hanging in there.
Yeah, thank you.
And sorry to end on such a bummer, but
That's all right. No, thank you.
you know.
John, you got something quick?
Yes, I just got a text from Max saying that it totally slipped his mind.
Ah,
I told him to jump on quick. I haven't heard back from him, but I wanted to let you know if you wanted to linger a little bit to see if Max would jump in.
yeah, he texted me too. So, but thank you, John. Yeah. I think he has very different sleep schedules than
Oh, he does.
a lot of us. He's probably
He
just
does.
waking up.
Yeah, he lived with me for one summer. He does. He definitely has a different sleep schedule.
Yeah. Well, this has been a real just an honor and a joy to be with you all today. And then thank you so much for participating as authors and so much, and thank you so much for all of those of you who registered and showed up to listen to the authors. This is being recorded, so once it's been made available, it'll go on the Transgress Press website. And Tristan, will it also go on YouTube?
Yeah, we'll put it on you. It'll be on YouTube, and then it'll be on the press website. I'll put it on my social media pages too.
Okay,
Yeah, and send it out to folks and encourage people. Yeah. I
perfect.
thank you all so much. This has been a blast and so
Should we
much.
take a picture? Who knows how to do that? Is there a way to
What's
do
the tech?
that?
Oh, I just have one question. I had to have this one question just of the whole group. I understand there were two people who went to seminary. I'm a third one. Is there a fourth?
We're in.
Wow. What are the chances of that happening?
Right? Yeah, in this space. Yeah.
It actually kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I
I
have the same experience when I run into social workers, and it's like there's a lot of social workers in the trans man space, and it's like,
Mhm.
people are like, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
All right.
And I forgot to plug something when I was saying my thing, and I feel like I should.
Yeah, go.
So I was also the co-editor of an anthology in the past 10 years. It came out in 2019, and I edited it with Michael Rajanoff, who is one of the other Manning Up authors. And the book was basically kind of one of the books in this form of like short first-person narratives, but for non-binary people. And it's called Non-Binary: Memoirs of Gender and Identity. And it was published by Columbia University Press in 2019, and it was actually a Lambda Literary finalist. And what I will say, because I think it's important to give credit where credit is due, is that like I really feel like it ended up being Micah driving that project. Like he was kind of driving the motorcycle, and I was in the sidecar. But I was really honored to be a part of that project, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention that in this forum. So just plugging that book as well.
Very cool. Thank you. Did you use a different name than Micah though? Is Micah using a different name now?
No, same
Oh,
name.
it's
Yeah.
still Micah. For some reason, I thought I heard you say Michael. I was like, oh, he changed his name.
No, sorry, that's just me.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I see that a couple people took some shots of the screen. So if you want to click on that and save it to your desktop, you can do that. Lauren, thanks for putting a link to your book. Yeah, Jamison, what'd you want to say? Yeah, you're on mute.
I just want to say that Becoming a Visible Man is out in a second edition. Everybody doesn't know that it was it still is Vanderbilt University Press's best-selling book of all time, which is why I got a second edition and the opportunity to update the vocabulary and some new information and lots of stuff that happened since 2003 when the manuscript was finished, before it was published in 2004. And in 2020, that came out in 2020, and in 2022, an audio book version came out that's on Audible. And I read it, and since Aaron Devor had written the foreword to it, Aaron get to record the foreword also, so that was very fun. And I've got two new history books. One definitely coming out. It's already in press at SUNY Press. It's called A History of Transgender Medicine in the United States, From Margins to Mainstream. And it will be out early next year. And Aaron has a chapter in that too about Reed Erickson. And I write about Jude in there too. And there's a lot of contributors to that book. About 48 or 50 people contributed to that book, and I'm one of the 4 editors and one of all those contributors too. And then I have another history book coming out that's focusing on community that doesn't have a publication date yet, but that's in process. And a lot of interest there on that book from Vanderbilt. We don't have a contract yet, but they're very seriously interested. And I'm still writing many other things too. So, but it's not making me rich, but I'm loving doing it. So it's all good. Just to let you know.
Yeah, thank you. And people are putting links and all kinds of things in chat. So if you want to grab, yeah, thanks, Willie. Yeah.
I want to strongly recommend Lauren Cannon's book. It's really, really good. Lauren Cannon's book that he put his link out. It's in paperback now, and that's in the chat.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Willie just put a link to his book, the recent one, Gender Splendor.
Great.
So, all right. Well, we're definitely over time now, but of course I bet a bunch of people would stay on for another hour if you could. So I appreciate it. I know I'd love to stay on. But I'm in Florida, and it's after 9 o'clock now, so it's near my bedtime as an old man.
Right.
Well,
Tristan, you want to close us out?
You can go. We'll stay.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, time for old men to go to bed. Yeah. Well, I've been traveling all night. It's pretty light out here, but I'm pretty tired and kind of want to take a nap myself. But hey, it's been a wonderful chat, guys, and it's just been so great to hear everything that people have been going through, the good, the bad, the tough, the challenges. Everybody really looks great. Still look great. And so I want to thank everybody for showing up and taking time out of their their schedule, good fun day, and just giving us some time to have nice community here virtual, because so a lot of us here don't have that. In certain places where you are located, we just you try to get 30 guys, 40 guys in a room. So I just want to thank everybody for making time today, and really love this community, and I'm so grateful for it. I wouldn't be where I am today if it weren't for you guys. So thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night, Zander. Good night, Theo. Thank you so much.
Stay on, those who want to chat some more.